All right, so it's telling me that I'm live, but I am not seeing the stream. Man, things are just unbelievably crazy right now. Let me go onto Facebook and see if things are actually happening. I cannot believe how nuts things have been. All right, so I am live, but I'm not sure it's associated with the event that I created. I hope so. Yeah, it's got the right title. All right, so good. Right down to the wire. So my usual streaming software is just causing all kinds of trouble. I had to go back to a previous one that I used. Thanks for coming. If I do truly appreciate the folks who've been paid, and I appreciate the folks who were giving me feedback yesterday when the stream was having so many difficulties. Right now, I'm just getting kind of weird feedback from Facebook. Let me just, let me do it a different way here. Everything has decided to technologically assault me today. All right, so I do have comments up. There we go. All right, so I know that's working. Um, let's let's just turn that down so I don't get any weird latency. And all right, so there we go. We have, we are at least up on Facebook. I'm not seeing anything. It's not going to be up. Oh, look, and then we're screwed up over here. Um, there we go. That should be all better. All right. Um, Welcome to it. What a crazy day yesterday was with all kinds of challenges. I'm not going to do the usual just quick little chat that we had leading up to yesterday's show, which I've since deleted. I want to thank you for coming to Coffee and Real Estate. This was one I really wanted to do, and it's really a lot of the things we've talked about um, over the last, I don't even know how long. How many months have we talked about the expected decline that we're going to see? For a while now, if you've been watching the show, for watching Coffee and Real Estate or following me on my podcast, you know that my predictions have been we'll see sort of a tapering off of the amount of increase in property values or in sales numbers, and then at some point we'll start to see areas actually go negative. And I had a lot of people tell me that probably was not going to happen. I thought I didn't think it would happen this quickly, but we're seeing it. So August is a pivotal month for us in terms of our local real estate market, and it's happening in two very interesting ways, and we're going to cover that. So, in case the internet decides to completely ruin me again, let's just go ahead and jump in. Um, and of course, the setup here is suddenly not working again. Let me just. All right, there we go. Wow. Nothing wants to cooperate today. All right, so here we are. And as usual, I have updated the way I present this data because it was so wonky before. For someone like me who's a numbers geek and likes kind of figuring out how things are going and mixing in a little buyer and seller psychology, it's a fun thing. But I realize the trip isn't as fun for other folks. So on the feedback of other folks, I've revamped how we do this. If this is your first time ever, then there's obviously new to you. If you missed last month I think was the first month I did it. And of course, since it is coffee and real estate, there has to be coffee. All right, so let's go ahead and jump in. The first numbers we're going to hit are total homes on the market. So when you think of total homes on the market, just think of it from two different perspectives. If you're a buyer, this is the number of products you have to choose from. How many homes are there out there for you to look at and potentially buy? If you're a seller, think of it as your competition. How many homes are you competing against in today's market? Now, of course, the level of demand is going to change, which is going to affect how lucrative the number is in terms of total inventory, right? If there's much fewer buyers, even a smaller inventory can be very amazing. But if it's higher, number of buyers is higher, then obviously if the number stays the same, the competition stays the same. All right. But what we can say right now in terms of total inventory across the board is inventory is up everywhere, right? Santa Clara County has seen, if we look at it, you can see that Santa Clara County has 1,745 homes currently on or that were on the market in August, down up from 1,537 last year, the same month last year. And the reason why we do that is we want to correct for seasonal influences, right? We don't want to compare a July to a December, right? All you learn there is the difference between a July and a December. You don't really learn anything about the real estate market. By comparing August of 2021 to August of 2022, we're eliminating all those seasonal influences and we're focusing on the things that actually matter and that can actually give us some insights into what's happening in our market right now. So, 14.9% increase from the same time last year. Same thing in San Jose, 24.6% increase. 927 homes up for sale in San Jose right now. And we've got some interesting numbers coming up on San Jose in the next couple of slides that I think are going to blow your mind. Up from 744 last year. As we look at Morgan Hill, we can see it's a 28.1% increase from the same time last year. That's 73 homes currently on the market in August in Morgan Hill. 57 was the number last year. And finally, as we look at Gilroy, we can see we're at 84 homes on the market right now. 58 were on the market a year ago. And that's a 44.8% increase for Gilroy. Now, Gilroy is also going to be an interesting one, right? Whenever you start to see a month of pivot or a market where things start to change, it usually can spell opportunity, right? The change is an interesting thing. And when you can identify where those changes are happening, you can often find opportunities. And I think Gilroy is one of those communities where some interesting changes are happening that feed a little bit more into the idea that as a buyer, you could potentially find some lucrative deals. I think we're also going to see the same thing in many San Jose communities, but it's a little bit more subtle in some areas, and we're still in a position where expectations on the part of sellers in San Jose are still a little out of line. So I think we're going to need some evolution in terms of perceptions in San Jose before things really get more interesting. All right. So let's go ahead and check out the next slide, which is new listings. These are homes that were listed for sale in the month of August. So if and from a psychological standpoint, these are sellers who made the decision to sell their home. And it's sometimes interesting to try to figure out what was the mindset, those types of things. I know for a long time we were trying to figure out how COVID played into many of these numbers. But for Santa Clara County, what we're seeing is a decrease. And actually we're seeing a decrease across the board. And what's interesting is the decrease is less pronounced the further away you get from the center of the county, right? It's nice to try to spot some of those trends. So in Santa Clara County, we saw 1,320 listings, down from 1,753. So that's a 24.6% drop. So a quarter drop from the same time last year. San Jose, almost the same numbers, a total of 700 homes listed in the month of August, down from 903 in 2021 for a 22.5% drop. Now look at this is less interesting, but 18.5% drop in Morgan Hill, where we saw 53 homes listed in August of 2022 and 65 homes listed in 2021. And as we now look at Gilroy, it is a 13.6% change, but in terms of the actual sway, that's actually kind of reasonable, right? That's relatively flat. That's not an insane change from 59 to 51. Given the relatively small numbers, I'd almost call that a wash, right? That's I think within the margin of error given the sample size for a place like Gilroy. So keep that in mind as we look more and more through these numbers. All right, now if you've got any questions, ideas, things you want to talk about, feel free to share them in the chat. I am looking at the chat as we move forward with today's live chat. If you have any other questions, if you're watching this after as a replay, please feel free to head over to soldbyrobert.com. From there, you can contact me. You can contact me through Facebook. If you have any questions or concerns, or you want to find out more information about your specific market situation, where your home is or where you're looking to shop, feel free to reach out to me. I'll be happy to help any way I can. Okay. Yeah, new listings. We already covered that. All right, now let's go ahead and talk about homes sold. These are all the homes that sold just in the month of August, again, in the month of August for 2021 and in 2022. And we can see that we've got declines across the board that vary a bit. And remember, when I talk about sample size, I know I mentioned that on the last slide. Sample size is just the bigger the sample size, the more reliable the data that you're extracting from it, or the more stuff you're applying to it. So that's why in many cases, when I mentioned Gilroy, I was saying that because of the sample size, that's practically a wash. It's just simply because one home can make a big difference in a much smaller sample size. So that's why I try to keep that in mind as I look at smaller communities. It's also why we start at this 10,000 foot view with the county to try to get the largest sample size that can apply to us to see if we can't get better conclusions out of that. Okay, so one thing to note is we had more homes listed than sold. So if we go back to the homes listed, we see that that number is bigger than the number of homes sold for each one of these areas. And that is why we're continuing to accumulate inventory. And that's an interesting dynamic because that tends to indicate if this trend continues, we simply continue to add more and more and more homes to inventory. And that eventually equals too much competition for sellers, not enough buyers to fulfill the needs of the inventory to bring it down, which is going to result in lower prices. It really doesn't have any choice. And I've got a slide at the end of this one that I think you're going to like. It's a little bit piece of new information that I think is relevant given today's market, but we'll talk about that when we arrive there. All right, so if we take a look at this, we can see that overall in Santa Clara County, we had 1,116 homes listed in August of 2022, compared to 1,666 in August of 2021, for a grand total of 33% as a drop from the same time last year. So a third, basically, of what we had last year did not materialize this year. In terms of San Jose, we have 572 homes that were listed in the month of August of 2021. 2022, and 834 homes in 2021 for a 31.4% drop. Morgan Hill, 16.1% drop from the same time last year. Again, given small sample size, that's kind of nearly a wash. 62 homes last year, 52 homes this year. And then Gilroy, little bit too much of a distance there between those two numbers to call it a full-on wash. Definitely something that's more related to just there being fewer listings going in or fewer homes getting sold. Down 32.1%, 56 homes sold last year, 38 homes sold homes this year. Just not even coming close to bringing down that inventory. The home sold numbers need to go up quite a bit in order for us to start seeing those inventory numbers going down. Okay, next. Average list price. Now, for those of you who are newcomers to the live stream and to my market analysis that I do for specific cities, and last week I published my Morgan Hill and my San Jose market reports. Feel free to check those out at soldbyrobert.com. This is one I like to use the original list price, meaning when the seller sat down and originally listed their home for sale, this is the price they had down on the listing agreement and that was most likely entered into the MLS. In fact, this is the number that was entered into the MLS right when it listed, right? So this is about understanding expectations. That when a seller is calibrated to a certain number, I think it's good to know what that number was, because you have to, in many cases down the road, overcome the expectations of sellers when it comes to their list price. Now, this means that we're not comparing what the price was when the home sold to the same time last year. So this is just comparing original list price, what the seller originally listed their home for, comparing August of last year to August of this year, just so we can kind of measure that as an expectation. Now, last year, what we saw was 1.616 million for Santa Clara County in general, up to 1.899, basically $1.9 million in August of 2022. That's a 17.5% increase over the course of the year in expectations. So sellers expected their homes to be, and these first two cities, or excuse me, the county and this first city of San Jose, I want you to remember what the expectations were. The expectations in Santa Clara County were that I can sell my home today for 17.5% more than I did last year, right? San Jose, almost 40%, just shy of 40%, 39.9% increase from the same time last year, going from 1.18 million to 1.66 million in San Jose. So remember those expectations, 17.5%, 40%. Morgan Hill, 12% increase from the same time last year, from 1.339 million to 1.5 million. And in Gilroy, we saw a 2.7% increase. So expectations on the part of sellers in Gilroy is far lower than everywhere else. And remember, one of the main things when you're trying to negotiate as a buyer is how well calibrated are sellers to the real market as it currently exists. Are they so out of whack that you can't really make an offer that is aggressive enough to make it worth it for you? This shows a much greater level of calibration, as you'll see in a minute, to reality than what many sellers in other areas have. So that is the number one bullet point, or at least it's the first. I don't know if we're ranking them in order of influence, but that would be one of the first bullet points relating to Gilroy being an attractive place, because sellers just aren't expecting crazy gains from the same time from the same time last year. All right. Now, the next one, and this is the biggie. This is the slide that if someone said your stream is going to completely blow up, which it did yesterday, you'll finally be able to get your stream going, but you'll only have 5 minutes to do the stream. What would you do? I would go to the next slide. That's one reason why I insisted on getting this stinking stream done this weekend, because this is a big one, and I'm really anxious. Obviously, we're not going to have as many live viewers because no one is expecting a show on Sunday morning. But as a replay, something that people can look at, absolutely, I want people to hear this, because this next slide is what I think should prepare you for the rest of this year and next year. All right, here we go. Average sales price. Now, I want you to just look at it for a minute and sort of digest mentally what's going on. So Santa Clara County in general, down 1.1%. You're going to say, Robert, it's just 1%. Yes, but it's 1% at the county level. And remember what I said about reliability of data before? This isn't dozens of data points. This is thousands of data points, right? And it's a full 1% drop. Now, for those of you who follow me on Facebook or Instagram, you know that I posted an image sometime in the last week relating to how prices had dropped in San Jose by 1.4% or 1.3%, somewhere in that range. And that was accurate at the time. But the folks at the MLS, usually 3 weeks into the month, adjust and correct data from the previous month. So this 1.6 number for San Jose and this 1% number for the county in general are both higher than what they were originally when I ran the numbers in the first week of September that fed that graphic that I created for Instagram. So we went from 1.684 million in San Jose, and these are the sales prices. So this is the reality. This isn't perception. This is an expectation. Now remember, compared to the same time last year, what were sellers expecting when they listed their homes in August? They were expecting to make 17.5% more, right? San Jose, sellers were expecting to make 40% more than they would have a year ago, and it's down 1.6. This is these two areas have a huge disconnect between what sellers' expectations are and what the reality on the ground is in terms of sales. So I definitely wanted to make sure you see this. I think that this is if anyone looks back, if we go forward 2 or 3 years, for someone who's being super honest about the data and when we saw what was coming, they're going to look back to this time of year in 2022 and say this was when we first started to see things happen, at least in our market. All right. Next in Morgan Hill, a very respectable 4.1% increase. But when we remember that it wasn't that long ago, it wasn't that many months ago, This year that I was talking about Morgan Hill getting a 20% increase from the same time the previous year, right? Um, so definitely what we've been talking about in terms of a slow roll, in terms of things slowing down. I think last month weren't we at like 8% for Morgan Hill, and the month before that weren't we at what, 12 or 13%? So we'll be able to look at these as we move through these slides, so you can see just what's happened directly behind us as we've moved forward in time. And then of course, this is the other one that is super interesting. What were the expectations of Gilroy residents when they were listing their home in August? What, around 2%? And they got 18.9%. So the disconnect on the Gilroy side is in favor of buyers. The expectations of sellers on average in Gilroy is more lucrative for buyers than it is in these other areas, because there's a huge disconnect in the county overall and in San Jose relating, and even Morgan Hill, really, right? Because everybody was double digits in terms of their expectations, but it's all single digits, some in the negative, that we're getting as it relates to the market there, but not Gilroy. So I think Gilroy, so far, another bullet point for our list, represents an interesting opportunity. Now, I've helped a few people buy houses in Gilroy, and there's also some very weird perceptions about Gilroy. Do they face some challenges that are unique to Gilroy or worse in Gilroy than in other communities? Sure. But just as bad, if not worse, would be areas of San Jose. So again, when I talk to people and they're looking for communities to live in, and I bring up Gilroy as a possibility, so many of the first responses are negative, and I'm not 100% sure why. There are some beautiful areas of Gilroy, just like there's some areas of Morgan Hill that aren't so great, and there's areas that are amazing in Morgan Hill. There's beautiful areas in San Jose, and then there's areas I really would rather not live in San Jose. So I don't know, maybe this has to do with some of these numbers we're seeing as it relates to Gilroy, but if you're okay with that extra commute, if you're okay with that extra 15, if you were someone who lived in Morgan Hill who commutes to San Jose for your job, if you're comfortable with that extra 10, 15 minutes, and the possibility of saving yourselves hundreds of thousands of dollars, and in an environment where we've already demonstrated through these numbers that Gilroy residents and sellers are far more calibrated to reality, far more accustomed to the idea of not seeing double-digit gains in their homes compared to last year, it makes it a much more beneficial market for you as a buyer to potentially take a look there. I happen to know real well the former principal of Christopher High School. She's a great lady, and it's a great school. So there are so many great things about Gilroy that people don't know about. Maybe we could call that the South Valley's best kept secret. I actually think San Martin may be the best kept secret, but we can talk about that some other time. But anyway, so this is it. This slide is the one I want everyone to memorize and remember as we move forward, because this is things to come. When we're seeing negative 1.6 in San Jose, negative 1% on sales price in those areas, and the fact that it's happening in the county in general is mind-blowing. Now, of course, the county's gigantic, and as I've said, it's about micro markets. But when on average it's down 1%, that's a big deal. And no one's talking about it. I haven't seen any headlines about it, but there it is. And it's absolutely why I insisted that despite the failure of yesterday's stream with all those technical issues, I had to reschedule for today. So that's it. If there was nothing else if you are totally not interested in any of this stuff and you don't want to hear the rest of what I have to say, you could go have your coffee, go have your breakfast with the family. I think that slide was really what's most important. And the other thing to keep in mind here is, as a side note, Santa Clara County, Morgan Hill, and San Jose all showed average sales prices that were lower than list price on average. So again, we've already shown that through the numbers, but just missing the expectation. We've seen that the expectation of sellers simply are not being met now, and it's going to take a while psychologically for some folks to grasp that. But we're going to see an interesting slide here at the end of this series that is also, I think, going to be interesting for you to see. All right. Percent of asking price. This is another big one, and boy, does it demonstrate the change that we've experienced in the market. Again, if you have any questions about what we're presenting here, feel free. I'm happy to to address anything that comes up. If you've got specific questions about other areas, once I finish with this, I'll be happy to check those out. If you've listened to past live streams, you know that we'll go anywhere. If someone wants to talk about Salinas, we'll talk about Salinas. We'll look up numbers. We'll do everything live right here with you. So feel free to ask any questions that you might have. All right, so let's start with Santa Clara County. We can see that last year, homes were getting 107% of their asking price. Now, for the purposes of this slide, this is not the original list price. And I do that with a very specific reason in mind. This is the percent of asking price that the price was when the offer was accepted. And I think that this is critical for buyers to calibrate to, and sellers to calibrate to what the buying experience was at the moment the decision was made. And at the moment the decision was made, this is a percentage of what that asking price was. Santa Clara County, as you can see, was at 107% last year, and it's at 99.9% this year. So that's an overall 6.6% drop. And it's basically a 0.1% below asking price conclusion. So on average, right now in the month of August, and that's just going to get higher in September. I bet this number, when I say higher, I mean lower. I believe that the amount that you will get of your list price will go down from 99.9 to 99.6 or 5 or something in that neighborhood as we move forward. Next, in San Jose. Last year in August, they were getting 107.2, and today in August of this year, they're getting 99.8, so 0.2% below asking price. In Morgan Hill, 105.7% this time last year, 99.4%. So do you see the trend? Again, it's a softening in what you get for your asking price as you head away from the center of the county. As you head, if you take San Jose as sort of where the center pin is, and then you head south, you see that the amount of drop below asking price of what folks are getting for their homes gets bigger. That's fairly typical. What's interesting, though, is we didn't see an overall average sales price drop in Morgan Hill and Gilroy. So there's definitely a disconnect there. Next, Gilroy, 105% this time last year. 99.2% in August of 2022, basically giving everyone on average a 0.8% drop in list price when they actually ended up selling their home. Okay. Next, days on market. Now, days on market has been one we've glossed over for months, primarily because it wasn't really an organic number. And by that, I mean it wasn't a market affected number. It was a number that was being defined by real estate agents and their policies. And I don't want to say that in a way that is negative, because as a real estate guy, if I'm representing the best interests of my client, I would do and did do the exact same thing. The idea being, I take a listing on a home, and I have a strategy that I use, whether you think it's effective or not. I've had arguments with other real estate agents about this. I do not list homes on Mondays. I list them on Tuesdays or Wednesdays. So it goes on the market on that Tuesday or Wednesday, prefer Tuesday, because I want to get online buzz Tuesday through Friday. I want to be able to schedule showings, that type of stuff. Then we'll do an open house over the weekend. Then we'll have a week. And depending on, and I'll spell this out right up front, depending on my personal perceptions of the situation, if there's any challenges to the home, if there are any things that make it potentially a little bit more difficult to market, I want to straddle 2 weekends before I'll accept offers in a super seller market, right? So that first weekend will happen, the second weekend will happen, and then that next week I will say Mondays by 5 p.m. That Monday I want offers. Well, okay, that is 13 days, right? What was the average days on market in San Jose in 2021? 13 days. 13 days in Gilroy. 15 days in Santa Clara County in general. That number was defined by what agents were simply putting into that listing saying, don't give us an offer until such and such a date. And if it's more days than that, typically, if it's 3, 4 days more than that, that's typically because there was back and forth negotiation with multiple offers, right? That's how the thing ended up working. Once we got over 20 days, I think we got into an organic scenario where the home just simply was not selling. And anecdotally, if you were someone who checks listings every day like I do, the wording changes, right? Instead of the confidential remarks that only real estate agents can see relating to a property, there tends to not be. In some areas, things are still super in demand because they're super popular submarkets. Now it is, we'll look at offers as they come. That's the new sentence, right? And that's a sentence that says it's a buyer's market. Or it says this seller really, really, really needs to sell soon, right? It could be either one of those two things. So today, if we look at our numbers, we see that in Santa Clara County in general, we had 15 days in August of last year, and we have 25 days in August of this year, for a 66.7% drop in Santa Clara County. If we look at San Jose, 13 days in August of 2021, 24 days in August of 2022 for an 84.6% drop overall. Increase overall in terms of days on market. For Morgan Hill, we went from 21 days to 28 days for a 33% increase. In Gilroy, we went from 13 days to 32 days for a 146.2% increase. And this is really an interesting dynamic for Gilroy. I mean, there was a period of time last year where Gilroy was going gangbusters. Things were just blowing out. And unfortunately for Gilroy, they didn't really tend to benefit from the crazy market until later in the cycle. And then the cycle shortened. And that may be one reason why we don't see expectations so out of whack, because the sales were just so insane for so long in all these other communities, Morgan Hill, San Jose, Santa Clara County in general, that I think sellers got used to it. I don't think the folks in Gilroy had time to get used to it. It kind of hit them late as we had months where literally every home and more that were listed in Morgan Hill were sold. For folks that were looking in the South County, they didn't have a choice. They had to go to the next city down, which the second city down. Don't forget San Martin. San Martin's a wonderful place. And ended up looking in Gilroy. So that may be one of the explanations for why there's no way elevated expectations on the part of sellers in Gilroy. Or agents in Gilroy are doing an amazing job in educating their sellers on where they should be priced, and sellers are just believing them. I'm not going to bet on that one. But anyway, hope springs eternal. All right, next. Okay, so if I'm not mistaken, this is my hot seat. Oh, no, here we go. Sorry. It's not till after this series. All right, so now we're going to look at layering total active listings, new listings, and homes sold over each other. And we can see that as we've got more listings compared to the same time last year. August 21. I don't think you can see my. No, you cannot see it. So if you're looking at August of 2021, you can see that we're absolutely higher inventory, but inventory has actually dipped a bit, and this makes total sense. And just because of seasonal influences, right? So you see back in July of 2021 a little bit of a bump in inventory. June, July of 2020, you see a plateau there that lasted all the way to October. This total active listings number going up is normal for the season. It's a seasonal thing. And then it's also normal for there to be a dip. Now, if you look at 2021, we saw a much bigger dip in the holiday season than we did why am I not seeing November and December? Well, that may be that. It may have actually gone down lower than that. I don't know who screwed with my numbers, but there you go. It would have gone down, right? In terms of Santa Clara County new listings, we're seeing them steadily dropping. But when you then compare that to homes sold, you can see they're still way below. We're not coming close to hitting new listings. Now, those two numbers seem to be converging with one another in terms of new listings and homes sold. But what's likely going to happen here is we're going to see new listings continue to either go down or flatten, but then we're going to see homes sold do the same thing. And total active listings is likely going to go down because we're going to be heading into those winter months. As soon as we get into late October, November, if sellers aren't urgently trying to sell their home, they're going to take their home off the market so they don't have to deal with it during Thanksgiving and Christmas time. That's just kind of the way that this ends up working. If a home stays on the market during the winter, if sellers do not take their home off the market, that is a clue to you that this is a motivated seller. This is a seller who needs to get that home sold, and it may be an opportunity for you to be more aggressive in how you negotiate. All right, Santa Clara County. Average list price versus average sales price. Now, that's the average list price. There's the average sold price. You can see that they take a huge turn away from each other in August of 2022. Look at that. They just start going completely opposite directions. And again, that's the original list price. So expectations versus reality, that is this graph. And we can see that there have been moments where, so those huge blips that you see in, say, August of 2020 and in January of 21 and in November of 21, those are all the result of a real estate agent entering an extra zero in the, and actually in some cases more than one agent, entering too many zeros at the end and then submitting that for the listing, and then they change it 20 minutes later. But that's still the original price according to the system. So they weren't trying to sell it for $2 million. They're trying to sell it for $20 million or $200 million. That's why those go crazy like that. However, the average sales price is not affected by that. The average sales price, there is no weird, unless someone did sell it and entered the wrong zero. Usually in these cases where you see big jumps like we did in December of 2020, that's simply because a multi-million-dollar home sold, like a $20 or $30 million home. And I believe that one was actually even in the news in December when that particular home sold. So just to give you an idea of why there's those peaks, they aren't real peaks. So if we normalize that curve, I think what we're tending to see here is really just that, right? Given the realities of how this data gets used or how this data gets created. All right, next, Santa Clara County. Looking back, this one, if anything is revealing a trend, this is it. So Santa Clara County percent of asking price, we can see we peaked at about 115% in, looks like March of 2022. And ever since then, it has been in a drop. And I've always talked about how these things don't tend to happen when you flip a switch, right? The changes in sales price, those types of things, it's not flipping a switch. If you consider 5 to 6 months enough of a flip switch, that's as close as you're going to get to a flip switch in terms of just an absolute dramatic indicator of how the market has changed. Look at how fast that drops from 115 to 99.9%. That if anything gives you the trend of where we're going, that's absolutely it. All right, now, days on market, and we have covered this one before, obviously. The trend here is up. It's making its way up. You can see that back in January of 2020, we had quite a few days on market, but I wouldn't be surprised if we get up to those numbers in the next 6 months. I think that in terms of how long it's going to take to get homes sold, we are going to see that number ramping up. And for buyers, that's good. And as inventory accumulates, and the only thing that sellers can do to attract buyers is reduce price, I think that we're going to see this number increase because it's hard to see in many cases how long it'll take for a seller to sort of come to grips with the idea that, well, we need to change our price. For some sellers, it's 2 weeks. For some sellers, it's a month. If you see a home in that 2 week to 30-day period of time and you are a buyer who's actively looking to buy right now, consider that more fertile ground than in many other areas where in that first week that a home is listed, the odds in terms of them being calibrated to the fact that they will probably get quite a bit less than they expect for their home. Don't expect that to be a reality. Don't necessarily reject those homes out of hat. I mean, be willing to make an offer, But if you're looking for something with a higher probability of acceptance, usually once sellers have gotten to a certain point, they're going to be more open to those kinds of offers and not respond negatively to them. Next. All right. This is the slide I added because I really wanted you all to see this one. This is the percent of listings with reduced prices in the marketplace. So in Santa Clara County in August, 34.6% of the homes on the market had a reduced price, meaning that from that original list price, the price was reduced before it sold. In San Jose, 36.8% of homes had their prices reduced. So now look at the trend as we go from San Jose down to Gilroy. This one bucks what we've talked about in terms of other trends. There's really not a trend. It's an up, it's an up, it's a down, it's an up. So San Jose 36.8, Morgan Hill 35.7, Gilroy 41.3. But the Gilroy number is interesting because it's another point on that list of why Gilroy is likely a place where you are going to be able to negotiate a better deal. Their sellers are calibrated to a single-digit increase from the same time last year. They and in this particular case, many of them, almost 50%, we're at 41.3. We're obviously about 9 percentage points away from that, but the highest reduced price requests in a market on the ones we survey in Gilroy. So there seems to be an awful lot of folks calibrated to what the market is and the need to reduce prices, and they are taking actions to address that. So there we go. That is the rundown of August of 2022. I hope you've all gotten a lot out of it. I honestly, that one slide about what average sales prices are is the one I want you to carry with you. And as you join me next month, keep that in mind as we move down the line and check out all of these numbers as they progress, because I think they are all going to continue to move towards buyers in terms of how the market is benefiting people. It's going to be benefiting buyers more than it's benefiting sellers. So what do we take from this? Well, if you're a buyer, even if you're not interested in buying right now, you're someone who's thinking, I'm going to wait for the market to come down more, or I'm not seeing what I want on the market yet, I would suggest you at least get a search going. You don't have to jump in and commit to buying just by searching for homes. You could contact a realtor like myself, and I'd be happy to set up a search for you. I've got a link to a tool to create a search associated with this stream on Facebook, so you can do that. And just get a search going that updates you on the frequency you want, whether it's daily or immediately when listings come on the market or weekly or whatever. Do that so that you are seeing the flow of properties as they come and go. It could literally be something you do once a week for 20 minutes before you check your email, and just get yourself acquainted with what's going on. I also suggest some sellers do this. Get a search that only searches in the area around where you live so that you're plugged into what's happening in your local market. And there's no better way to do that than to be subscribed to a list that gives you all the homes listed for sale within, say, a mile of your home. And it's something easy we can set up for you in just a few minutes. If you're a seller, so buyers and investors, get your searches going. I think that you're going to find that winter is potentially going to be an amazing opportunity time for you. And as we move into 2023, we may see some numbers that go up a little bit, but I think overall they'll be down when compared to the same time last year. And we'll continue to see a decline overall. I don't see us getting control of inflation anytime super soon without going to at least 10% interest rates. And remember, next week, there is going to be a meeting of the interest rate people, and they're going to be deciding, and the word is they're going to go with a full percentage increase in interest rates. Right now, we are in an environment where, on the one side, they're willing to raise interest rates, which is obviously a burden on you and me and everyone else, but they're not willing to make those decisions that reduce their spending. And the relationship between those two things is really not arguable. When the government decides they're going to spend more money by giving it out to students to pay off part of their student loan, or to give to the Ukraine, or to whatever they're doing, and whether you agree or disagree with any of those things is not what we're here to debate. All we're saying is that in those cases, it's greater debt, which doesn't mean they're allocating existing funds to something. It means They're going further into debt and they're printing money. They're not creating money out of nowhere. They're creating it from nothing. They're not earning the money. They're creating it. And so every dollar they print up digitally or in reality negatively affects the dollar in your pocket. It reduces the buying power of the dollar in your pocket every time they do that. And they're doing it a lot. So on the one side, they can say they're going to raise interest rates, which is what you do when you're trying to fight inflation. But if you don't have the fiscal responsibility side of it, you are emptying the water from a boat with your bucket while two people behind you are filling it with water. So it's difficult to catch up and to actually address the problem you're trying to address. There were also some articles that came out talking about how expect to see a reduction in interest rates next year, without giving you the bad news that the reason why they'll be reducing interest rates is because they are assuming that sometime in 2023 they'll be addressing inflation, and once inflation is taken care of, they'll reduce interest rates to address recession. Well, recession is a bad thing. People lose jobs. It's a contraction. Businesses produce less. Many businesses go out of business altogether, and the reason they reduce interest rates is so that it encourages borrowing on the part of businesses for capital expansion and research and making more jobs and that kind of stuff. So yes, interest rates may go down if inflation is dealt with to try to manage recession, but so many people will have lost jobs that they won't be able to take advantage of those new low interest rates, which is another reason why I like to encourage people to always get a fixed rate mortgage. Do not get an adjustable rate mortgage unless you absolutely plan to resell that property within the window that it stays fixed. And you shouldn't, because the odds are the property is going to be worth less at the end of that window. So I don't think that's a smart bet either. Always go with the fixed rate, because if we are going to see lowering interest rates down the road, maybe not next year. I don't think we'll get control of inflation and recession in that amount of time. But in, say, 2 years, 3 years, you will have an opportunity probably to reduce your interest rate through a refinance. And that is a much smarter path to go. Fix your housing costs today at a fixed amount so they won't go up in a year or 2 years or whenever your adjustable rate adjusts. Okay, let's go ahead and look at the newsy news. So annoying. There we go. Okay. All right, so we are good to go there. All right. So we're going to start with this one. These are just a few articles that I wanted you all to keep in mind as we move forward in terms of what's happening with the market. We'll wrap these up, and I'll let you guys loose to go enjoy your weekend. So mortgage demand from home buyers falls 29%, basically 30% since last year, as interest rates surge past 6%. None of this suggests we're going to see a boost in the number of buyers. There is no argument to be made that we're going to see an increase in home sales. This is just going to feed the continuing accumulation of inventory, period. And these numbers are going to get worse. After this next week, they will get worse to some degree. Right now, granted, mortgage rates are more tied to 10-year Treasury notes than they are to prime rates, but eventually that stuff all plays in, and so much of it is psychological that as soon as the Fed makes the decision to raise interest rates, it's going to impact loans. So, not great news, and it's going to feed all the things that I think continue to feed my theory that 2023 is going to be a really, really tough year. If you want to check out last week's podcast, you can find that at soldbyrobert.com. Just scroll down a little bit, and on the left-hand side, there's a View Podcasts and News. The latest podcast is titled 2023 is going to be a real estate bloodbath. So I'm not holding any punches on that one or pulling any punches. You can check out what I have to say there and see if you agree based on the different news items that I've encountered over the last month or two. Since last year, home buyers' demand for mortgages has fallen by nearly a third. Refinance demand also declined as rates surged on hawkish messages from the Federal Reserve. And that's just what's happening. 30-year mortgage rates at 6.3%, 14-year high. So again, these are all things that will push down two things. It'll reduce the number of buyers, and it'll reduce the amount that buyers who stick in the market will be willing to pay. Not because they have a choice, but because in order to make the right payment per month, they're going to have to reduce what they spend overall. All that's going to succeed in doing is pushing down prices at the top 50%. The top half is going to have to shift down to try to keep in a price point that more buyers are at. And we've talked about this a bunch of times. If you're a podcast listener, you know that I've talked about price banding before, and you can identify interesting and bizarre bands of prices where you'll have a price band, say at one point, and there's these amount of buyers and there's home selling at that level. Go up a band and there's actually more buyers and more homes selling at that point. It's an interesting phenomenon that is super cool to spot in different markets and try to take advantage of. But pricing for sellers is going to be influenced by that. And I want to make sure all my sellers out there who are trying to fight through this market and price effectively and get sold as quickly as possible to take out their profits now before the market goes down, make sure to pay attention to that potential price banding. Talk to your real estate agent about it and ask if they've looked into it. The odds are they're going to say no, but just encourage them to do it. Look at activity at different price levels. Because literally, if you price yourself in a lower band, you could find yourself in a position where there's actually fewer buyers at your price point. And if you increased your price by just enough to go over a certain amount, you're showing up in more searches, or you're garnering more interest by a larger number of potential buyers. So it doesn't happen all the time, but it's definitely something good to be aware of. Okay. I liked this one because it was specifically about our California market. Home sales off 24% year over year. Just look for that number to continue to increase as buyers are priced out of the market due to mortgage interest rates. Prices up only 1.4% year over year across the entire state. And August existing home sales forecasts are not great in terms of where I think we're going to go, at least my estimation. Next, mortgage rates top 6% for the first time in 2008. There was one other tidbit in here that I thought was worth. Let's see. The increased rates have published monthly mortgage payments 60% higher year over year. Senior economist and director for forecasting in the National Organization of Realtors. There's no doubt that these higher rates hurt housing affordability. Mortgage rates already marked a grim milestone when they hit 5.7%, a rate that puts a median home out of reach of the typical household. So, and this one, one of the reasons why I wanted to run this one down was really stick with your guns on a fixed rate mortgage and make sure you're looking at all the products that are available. Think of it as a product, right? You are renting money. So think of it as all these different organizations out there, whether it's your credit union or Bank of America or Wells Fargo or a mortgage broker. They're all going to have products to offer you, and you need to try to get exposed to as many of them as possible. Credit unions are great. If you want to get a good deal, the odds are best at a credit union. But look at 30-year fixed rate mortgages. Look at 20-year fixed rate mortgages. Look at 15. Figure out what ones work for you. Do not do the adjustable rate. I cannot think of a scenario right now where an adjustable rate mortgage works. Even if you are planning to sell before the rate would adjust, I think you end up losing money potentially in that scenario. You end up being underwater. All right. Finally, this is an article I've shared before in a podcast, but I wanted to let everyone see this because I think this also feeds into the reduction in buyers. When you get a 50% number of employers expecting to make job cuts through layoffs or in other things and other data here, 50% of firms are anticipating a reduction in overall headcount. 52% foresee instituting a hiring freeze. And from truth on the ground, I have former clients and current clients who work for these various companies, and they are telling me they're on a hiring freeze. In fact, even one here, 44% are rescinding job offers. I have a handful of folks that I've talked to within the last week who work for a company where they were hiring for a position. They had given someone a offer and rescinded it. Just as this kind of indicates, right? So they didn't even backfill that position. They were going to backfill a position that had been vacated by someone else, gave someone an offer, and then rescinded that offer and said we're going to have to get along without that position for a while. So all real things that are happening in the world. I hope that's been useful for you. As always, with the podcast or with the Coffee and Real Estate, the goal is always to leave you with more knowledge than we take up in your time. I hope we've accomplished that today. I hope the rest of your weekend is fantastic. I apologize for the very weird live stream issues we had this weekend. Hopefully we will never have them again. But I look forward to seeing you all next month. So take it easy.